The last thing running through most people's minds while standing at the edge of the Cliffs of Moher is a property listing. They are looking at 700 feet of sheer limestone dropping into the Atlantic, watching gannets and razorbills wheel over the water below, and thinking, understandably, about the view rather than the mortgage. In 2024, approximately 1.5 million people made exactly that trip, standing exactly at that edge, thinking exactly those thoughts. The Cliffs of Moher were the second most visited paid attraction in the entire country that year, behind only the Guinness Storehouse in Dublin. And then, almost without exception, every single one of those 1.5 million visitors got back in their car, their coach, or their tour bus and left. That is the question worth actually investigating here, not why people visit West Clare. The visitor numbers answer that question clearly enough on their own. The real question is why a place capable of pulling 1.5 million people through its gates every single year, a place that plainly moves people enough to make the journey specifically to stand at its edge, so rarely gets considered as somewhere to actually live. So let me walk through what I found when I looked at this seriously, rather than just as a day trip. Start with what the cliffs themselves represent, because the geological and historical layers here run deeper than most visitors realize as they queue for the viewing platform. The cliffs stretch for roughly 14 kilometers along the County Clare coastline, formed from layers of shale and sandstone laid down approximately 320 million years ago, when this entire region sat beneath a river delta rather than the open Atlantic. O'Brien's Tower, the stone observation tower, visible in nearly every photograph taken here, was built in 1835 by Cornelius O'Brien, a local landlord who constructed it specifically to impress visiting Victorian tourists, making organised tourism at this exact spot nearly 2 centuries old rather than a purely modern phenomenon. Just offshore stands Brannon Moor, a limestone sea stack severed from the mainland cliffs sometime in the 20th century, a visible, ongoing reminder that this coastline is still actively being carved by the same Atlantic forces that shaped it in the first place. Here is the number that puts the 1.5 million annual visitors into sharper context. That is roughly 3 times the entire population of County Clare, arriving to look at one specific stretch of coastline within a single calendar year. And yet drive 20 minutes in almost any direction from the cliffs themselves, and you land in towns and villages that most of those 1.5 million visitors will never even glance at, let alone seriously consider moving to. West Clare, the district encompassing the towns and villages surrounding the cliffs, recorded a population of 40,341 people at the most recent census, an increase of 7.9% since 2016. That growth figure alone deserves attention, because it runs directly against the rural depopulation pattern affecting large stretches of the Irish west coast. West Clare is not emptying out. It is, modestly but measurably, filling back in. Here is where most people stop thinking about West Clare entirely though, because the tourism economy built around the cliffs creates a specific kind of blind spot. Visitors arrive, spend a few hours or at most a single day, and leave with the impression that the region exists primarily as scenery to be photographed rather than as somewhere with functioning towns, real employment, and a genuine, ongoing community life independent of the tour bus schedule. Lahinch, roughly a 15-minute drive south of the cliffs, has built a genuinely significant reputation as one of Europe's premier surfing destinations, with consistent Atlantic swells drawing international competitors and a thriving surf school industry that operates essentially year-round rather than only during the traditional summer tourist season. Doolin, closer still to the cliffs and serving as the main departure point for boat trips to the Aran Islands, has developed one of the most respected traditional Irish music scenes in the entire country, with pubs hosting sessions most nights of the week that draw musicians as much as tourists. Kilkee, further south along Loophead, retains a genuinely old-fashioned Irish seaside town character, its horseshoe-shaped bay and Victorian bathing pools drawing a steadier, more local Irish holidaymaker crowd than the international tour groups clustering around the cliffs themselves. Here is the part of the investigation that surprised me most, though, and it is the number that should genuinely change how people think about this region. Property prices across West Clare generally sit below the wider County Clare average, itself already considerably more affordable than Dublin or Cork. Typical house prices in the towns and villages surrounding the cliffs run in the region of €280,000, meaningfully lower than equivalent coastal property in more heavily developed tourist regions like County Kerry's Ring of Kerry towns or parts of West Cork, despite West Clare drawing genuinely comparable, and in the case of the cliffs themselves, considerably higher annual visitor numbers. So, why does the day trip almost never become a life change? I want to walk through the actual practical reasons rather than simply asserting that people are missing an obvious opportunity, because the barriers here are real and worth naming honestly. The first is seasonality, and it is the most immediate barrier anyone actually considering the move will encounter. The 1.5 million annual visitors to the cliffs are not evenly distributed across the calendar year. The overwhelming majority arrive between May and September, meaning that businesses built around that tourism, the cafes, the tour operators, the gift shops, the guest houses, experience a dramatically compressed earning season, followed by several genuinely quiet months where footfall drops to a fraction of summer levels. Building a full-time livelihood around tourism alone in this specific part of West Clare requires either diversifying well beyond the cliffs themselves or accepting an income pattern that looks nothing like a standard salaried job. The second barrier is distance from Ireland's larger employment centres. Shannon Airport and its surrounding industrial and aviation employment base sit roughly 45 minutes to an hour away by car, offering the nearest meaningful concentration of non-tourism jobs. Limerick City, with its more diverse economy, sits a little further again. That distance is entirely manageable for a commuter willing to drive, and increasingly manageable for anyone in a remote-capable role. But it does rule out West Clare as a realistic option for anyone requiring daily in-person attendance at a job based in a larger city, which historically has represented a meaningful share of the working-age population that towns like this need in order to grow sustainably. The third barrier is less practical and more psychological, and it might be the most significant of the three. A place visited specifically as a day trip destination develops what tourism researchers sometimes describe as a single-purpose identity in visitors' minds. People who have only ever experienced West Clare through the lens of a cliffside car park, a gift shop, and a viewing platform genuinely struggle to picture the same place as somewhere with schools, GAA clubs, supermarkets, and the full ordinary infrastructure of daily life, even when all of that infrastructure demonstrably exists just a short drive from the cliffs themselves in towns like Ennistymon and Kilrush. Here is the detail that makes this psychological barrier worth taking seriously rather than dismissing, though. The 7.9% population growth already happening in West Clare suggests that some people are managing to see past exactly that single-purpose identity and are choosing to move here anyway, drawn by remote work flexibility, more affordable property compared to Dublin or Galway, and a genuine, if seasonal, tourism economy that provides a meaningful supplementary income stream for those willing to build a life around it rather than simply visiting it. Local business owners in the towns surrounding the cliffs describe a specific and recurring pattern among the newer residents choosing to settle here. Almost without exception, they mention first visiting as tourists, sometimes years earlier, and describe a slow, specific realization that the place they had experienced for a single afternoon actually functioned as a full, complete community the rest of the year once the tour buses had gone home for the season. That realization, arriving well after the initial visit rather than during it, appears to be the actual mechanism by which West Clare's population growth is happening, one delayed decision at a time, rather than through any single dramatic marketing effort or infrastructure announcement. That is the honest answer to the question this investigation set out to answer. The day trip so rarely becomes a life change, not because West Clare lacks whatever qualities would make it a genuinely livable place. The population growth numbers already prove otherwise. But because the tourism economy built around the cliffs is specifically and effectively designed to deliver a single, memorable, several-hour experience, and almost nothing in that experience is designed to show visitors what an ordinary Tuesday actually looks like in Lahinch, Doolin, or Kilkee. Whether more of that 1.5 million annual visitors eventually make the same delayed realization that current residents describe making themselves is genuinely an open question, and one that West Clare's continued population growth over the coming census cycles will answer more clearly than any single statistic available today. But the region already has more of what a full, sustainable community actually requires: affordable housing, real schools, functioning towns, and a growing population than its identity as pure scenic backdrop for a day trip would ever suggest to the 1.5 million people who pass through it every single year without staying the night. If this look at what sits behind Ireland's most photographed cliffs gave you a reason to look at West Clare differently, please subscribe, like this video, and share it with someone who has visited the cliffs but never considered staying. Let us know in the comments whether you think you could actually live here, not just visit.